a serial killer who got out of prison and reinvented himself as a travel influencer on TikTok until he killed again. 5 men who raped an 18-year-old girl, filmed it, and celebrated in a WhatsApp group they literally named the Wolfpack. And a killer who confessed, but in 16 years never told anyone where he hid the body. Welcome everyone to the dark side of Spain's internet. Imagine your mom calls you one day and tells you your sister is missing. No fight, no warning signs. She just stopped answering her phone. And the last person who saw her alive is some guy she met on TikTok. Spain has one of the most disturbing digital crime cases in recent memory. A case that mixes social media, fake identity built online, and a man who had already killed before, multiple times. This is the TikTok killer case. To understand what happened in August 2023, you first need to know who José Jurado Montilla is. Montilla was born in Badajoz, Spain, in 1960. He had a troubled past from early on, but what put him on the map was what he did between 1985 and 1987 in the Malaga region. In November 1985, he shot and killed Francisco Gonzalez, a 57-year-old man on a rural property. 2 years later, in March 1987, he killed Antonio Paniagua the same way. And a month after that, in May of that same year, he murdered 2 tourists, a German woman and an English man, who were visiting the area. 4 people, 4 murders. He was arrested, tried, and sentenced to 123 years in prison, which sounds final. But in Spain, like in many countries, there's a cap on how long you actually serve. Because of that, Montilla walked out of prison in 2013 after serving just 28 years, 28 for lives. And when he got out, he needed to reinvent himself. So he found TikTok. What Montilla did in the years that followed is, in hindsight, almost hard to wrap your head around. He created a TikTok account under the name Dinamita Montilla. Dinamita is dynamite. Yep, that was his choice. And started posting travel videos from around Spain. Hikes through the mountains, small towns, landscapes. Completely harmless content, the kind any solo traveler might make. He had around 6,000 followers. Not huge, but a real community. People who followed him, commented on his videos, wrote to him, and he wrote back. He was friendly, warm. He came across as a free spirit, an adventurer who had decided to live life on his own terms, just wandering the country. Nobody knew he had spent 28 years in prison for killing 4 people. Nobody knew anything. In August 2023, Esther Estapa Perez was 42 years old and living in Seville. Esther was going through a rough stretch. She had recently left an abusive relationship and was trying to put herself back together. She decided to travel solo through Spain, a way to disconnect and find some peace. She was in Alicante when she somehow crossed paths with Montilla. It's not entirely clear how they met, whether it was in person or if there had been prior contact through his social media. What is known is that they started traveling together. Montilla took her around to different places. It seemed like a casual, friendly encounter. The kind of story that, in a different version of the world, would have just been a fun travel anecdote. On August 20th, they arrived in Gandia, a coastal city near Valencia. They looked for a place to stay. By that point, Esther had a leg injury that was making it hard for her to move around. On August 23rd, Josefa Perez, Esther's mom, received a message from her daughter's phone. The message said Esther had decided to move to Argentina, that she was leaving with some friends, that she wouldn't be able to stay in touch for a while. Josefa read that message and knew immediately something was wrong. Why? Because she talked to Esther every single day. Because Esther had no friends in Alicante. Because Esther had concrete plans for the coming weeks. And because Esther would never have sent a message like that without calling first, Josefa went to the police that same day. And this is where the story gets even more disturbing. A few days after Esther's disappearance, Montilla called the family. Him. On his own. Voluntarily. He introduced himself as the last person who had seen Esther, said he had watched her leave on her own on August 21st, and offered to help look for her. He even posted videos on his TikTok account asking if anyone had information about her whereabouts. Think about that for a second. The man who almost certainly had already killed her was on TikTok asking for tips on her disappearance, using the same platform he had built his friendly traveler image on, now playing the role of a concerned witness. But the family wasn't just going to sit there. When Josefa looked up Montilla's name online, what she found stopped her cold. José Jurado Montilla. 4 murder convictions, 28 years in prison, a convicted killer. That was all they needed. The investigation moved forward. Police opened a direct line of inquiry on Montilla, and in May 2024, he was arrested. Not for Esther's case, but for another murder. In 2022, a 21-year-old man identified only as David had been shot and killed on a family property in the province of Malaga. During the investigation, DNA evidence found on David's backpack came back as a familial match to Montilla. That was enough to arrest him. With Montilla in custody, the search for Esther intensified. In June 2024, nearly 10 months after her disappearance, hikers found a human skull in a reed-covered area in Gandia. DNA testing confirmed what the family had feared. It was Esther. The autopsy determined she had been sexually assaulted and struck in the head with a blunt object. Today, José Jurado Montilla is in pre-trial detention in Spain, awaiting trial for the murders of Esther Estapa and David. No trial dates have been set. In March 2026, Netflix released a 2-part documentary series called The TikTok Killer, following Esther's family's search and reconstructing Montilla's digital trail through his videos, posts, messages, and geotags. Esther's family marks August 23rd as the anniversary of her death. So what makes this case so disturbing beyond the crime itself? It's the deliberate use of the internet to build a mask. Montilla didn't stumble onto TikTok by accident. He used it to become someone, to project the image of a harmless, free-spirited adventurer, so that when someone like Esther came across him, there were no visible red flags. Because Google only shows you what someone has built for themselves. And he had built something very carefully. And the coldest part of all, when Esther disappeared, he went right back to TikTok. This time to look innocent. That's what changes when crime meets the internet. It's not just about what you do, it's about who you can make yourself look like. Same tool, 2 completely different purposes. That's what changes when crime meets the internet. It's not just about what you do anymore, it's about who you can make yourself look like. Our next case also involves images that should never exist, screenshots that became evidence, and a WhatsApp group whose name will tell you everything you need to know before I even explain it. This case isn't about one killer, it's about 5 men, 1 victim, and a court ruling that sent the entire country of Spain into the streets. I'm talking about La Manada, the Wolfpack. In the last case, we talked about a man who used the internet to build an image, to seem harmless, to get close to his victim without raising any alarms. But this next case is different. There was no attempt to hide. The attackers filmed what they did. They shared it with each other. They laughed about it, and they figured there would never be any consequences. They were wrong. But what happened after those recordings came to light, in the courtrooms, in the streets, across the entire country, is a story Spain is still processing. July 7th, 2016, Pamplona, Spain. It's the early hours of the San Fermin festival, one of the most famous celebrations in the world. Thousands of people in the streets. Music, alcohol, pure chaos. A city that literally doesn't sleep that week. An 18-year-old girl, who for years was referred to in the media only as the Wolfpack victim, and who years later chose to reveal her name, Lucia, was walking alone toward the car where she was going to sleep that night. She had come to the festival from Madrid. On the way, she crossed paths with a group of 5 men. They introduced themselves, made small talk, offered to walk with her. They seemed normal. It was a party night. These things happen. What happened next became one of the most shocking stories in Spain's recent history. The 5 men led Lucia to the entryway of a building on Paulino Caballero Street. There, in that dark enclosed space, all 5 of them raped her. And while it was happening, they filmed it, not accidentally. Not because someone pulled out a phone for a second, they filmed it deliberately. Multiple videos, different angles, different phones. When it was over, they stole her phone, walked out of the building, and left. Lucia was alone in that entryway. When she came out, some passersby found her crying on a bench and called the police. The 5 men were arrested that same day, just a few hours later, at the bull run. They were watching the bulls like nothing had happened. Their names are José Ángel Prenda, Antonio Manuel Guerrero, Ángel Bosa, Alfonso Jesús Cabezuelo, and Jesús Escudero. Prenda was the ringleader. Guerrero was a civil guard officer, a member of Spain's national security forces. Bosa had prior criminal convictions. And they had a WhatsApp group. The group was called La Manada. That means the pack, the wolf pack, a group of predators that hunts together. That name, they called themselves that. And in that WhatsApp group, they shared the videos of the rape while it was still happening, along with messages that the prosecutor read out loud during the trial. and that left the entire courtroom in absolute silence. Messages like "Bon appetit" with laughing emojis. What did you do to the girl? Did you throw her in the river? Another Marta del Castillo, a reference to a teenage girl from Seville who had been murdered years earlier and whose body was never found. We'll talk about Marta's case in detail later in this video. Chloroform? They were celebrating, in real time, while it was happening. The trial began in November 2017 and was, from day one, a scandal. The defense strategy was something that outraged the entire country, trying to prove that Lucia had consented. To do that, they hired a private investigator who followed the victim for weeks after the attack, photographing her daily life, her outings, her activity on social media. Those photos were presented as evidence that Lucia was living normally after the assault, as if that proved anything about what had happened that night. The court accepted those photos as valid evidence. At the same time, it rejected as evidence a video found on one of the attacker's phones that showed them, weeks before the Pamplona attack, sitting next to an unconscious 21-year-old woman in the backseat of a car, making comments about her and wondering out loud if she was dead. They accepted the victim's Instagram photos. They rejected the attackers' video of another unconscious woman. That was the trial. On April 26, 2018, the court published its ruling. The 5 men were found guilty, but not of rape, of sexual abuse. The legal distinction in Spain at that time was this: rape required proving violence or intimidation. The court determined that because Lucia hadn't physically resisted, because she was frozen with fear, surrounded by 5 men in an enclosed space, there wasn't enough evidence of intimidation to classify it as rape. The sentence, 9 years in prison for each of them. The reaction was immediate and massive. That same night, thousands of people poured into the streets in Pamplona, Madrid, Barcelona, Seville, and dozens of other cities. Signs read, "It's not abuse, it's rape. Sister, I believe you. The patriarchy's justice rapes us all." The hashtag, "Yo sí te creo, I do believe you," trended across Spain and throughout Latin America. Women all over the country started sharing their own stories under the hashtag Cuéntalo, Spain's version of Me Too. The whole country was in the streets. The case kept moving through the legal system. Spain's Supreme Court reviewed the ruling and in June 2019 reversed it. The 5 men were convicted of rape, not sexual abuse. Their sentences were increased to 15 years each. Guerrero got 2 additional years for stealing Lucia's phone. But the story didn't end there. In 2023, one of the convicted men, Angel Boza, benefited from a law that the left-wing government itself had passed. The Only Yes Means Yes law, designed to strengthen the rights of sexual assault victims. But the law had a technical drafting error that set lower minimum sentences for certain crimes. Because of that loophole, Boza got his sentence reduced from 15 years to 14. The same government that had promised more protection for victims had passed a law that ended up benefiting one of the most notorious rapists in the country's history. Lucia's attorney said, "For my client, it's not about 1 year less. Even a single day's reduction would be an enormous amount of pain for her." But there's something else that makes this case part of this series about crime and the internet. The videos they recorded that night didn't disappear. They circulated, not publicly. That would have meant additional charges, but in private circles, in the investigation, among people with access to the case file. And social media was the battleground of this case from day one. The private investigator tracked the victim's social media. The attackers themselves used WhatsApp to coordinate, share, and celebrate what they did. The media covered every update in real time, and the public response, the protests, the movement, the cultural shift, was organized almost entirely through Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. This wasn't just a criminal case. It was the first major case in Spain where the internet was simultaneously the weapon, the evidence, the legal battleground, and the place where society decided it had had enough. Spain's rape law changed because of this case. The legal definition of consent changed because of this case. The feminist movement in Spain has a before and after, and it's called La Manada. And at the center of all of it is an 18-year-old girl who went to a summer festival and spent years listening to 5 defense attorneys argue that what was done to her wasn't that serious, that she had consented, that her Instagram photos after the attack proved something. Lucia won the case, but the price she paid to win it was another kind of violence. Slower, more institutional, but just as real. Our third and final case also takes place in Spain. It also involves a young woman. It also involves digital messages that became evidence, but this case has something that sets it apart from everything else. The body was never found, and the killer confessed, but never told the whole truth. More than 15 years later, the family is still searching. This is the story of Marta del Castillo. In the 2 previous cases, we talked about crimes where the internet was the scene, where the perpetrators themselves left digital trails, videos, messages, posts that came back to haunt them. But our last case is different, because this crime happened before social media was what it is today. And what makes it so disturbing isn't just what happened, it's what was never found out. The body that never turned up, the stories that never matched, and the digital messages that left more questions than answers. January 24th, 2009. Seville, Spain. Marta del Castillo Casanueva was 17 years old. She was a regular girl from Seville. She liked hanging out with friends, listening to music, spending time with her family. She had a boyfriend, she had plans, she had her whole life ahead of her. That afternoon, her parents watched her leave the house. She told them she was going to meet up with Miguel, her ex-boyfriend, a 19-year-old named Miguel Carcaño, to clear some things up between them. They had broken up recently. They were meeting to talk. It was a normal afternoon. Marta never came home. That same night, her parents, Antonio del Castillo and Eva Casanueva, started calling her. Nothing. Phone off. They called her friends. Nobody knew anything. They went to the police station to file a missing persons report. The authorities, according to the family's repeated claims, did not activate the search protocol immediately. 17 hours passed before a formal search was launched. 17 hours. In those 17 hours, if Marta's body was still somewhere accessible, there was time to find it. Time for the story to end differently, or at least for the family to have something to hold on to. That never happened. In the days that followed, something unprecedented happened in Spain. Social media, at that time, the most popular platform in Spain was 20, a local network that worked similarly to Facebook, filled up with content about Marta, search groups, campaigns to spread her photo, calls to action. Thousands of people who had never met her started sharing her image, her name, her details. It was one of the first major online mass search campaigns in Spanish history. And while that was happening on social media, police were looking closely at the phones of everyone around her, because phones always leave something behind. A few days after her disappearance, Miguel Carcaño was arrested. And he confessed. He said Marta had come to his apartment that afternoon, that they argued, that he hit her in the head with an ashtray and she died, that he panicked, that he called his brother and a friend known as El Cuco, and that together they threw her body into the Guadalquivir River from the Señorita Bridge. They started searching. The river was dragged for weeks. Divers, dogs, helicopters, nothing. The body wasn't in the river. Then came the first new version. Carcaño changed his statement, said the body wasn't actually in the river, that it was in a dumpster, that from there it had gone to the landfill in Alcalá de Guadaira. They started searching the landfill. To find a body there, investigators estimated they would need to move approximately 40,000 tons of garbage. They tried. Nothing. Then came a third version, then a fourth, then more. In total, Miguel Carcaño gave 7 different accounts of what happened to Marta's body. 7. The river, the landfill, a ditch in Camas, a plot of land in another town. Every time a search came up empty, a new story appeared, and each new story sent dozens of people, police officers, firefighters, volunteers, the family, searching somewhere new. While Marta's father, Antonio del Castillo, kept showing up in front of cameras, eyes hollowed out, asking for someone to just tell the truth. This is where the digital messages come in, and where the case gets even darker. As the investigation moved forward, investigators analyzed the phones of everyone involved, and on Carcaño's phone, they found something disturbing, messages he had exchanged with his girlfriend at the time, a 14-year-old girl named Rocio, 10 days after Marta's disappearance. The messages were cryptic, loaded with tension. In one of them, Rocio wrote to Miguel, "You owe me one." 4 words. But in the context of everything else, those 4 words said a lot. What did he owe her? What did she know? What had she kept quiet? And there was another reference in the messages that was never fully explained, a mention of a ground zero, a phrase investigators believed could be connected to Marta's body or the location where it was hidden. Rocio was never charged with anything. The involvement of the minors in the case was closed for lack of evidence, but those messages stayed there, unanswered, like a locked door nobody could open. Then there was El Cuco. Javier Garcia, known as El Cuco, was a minor at the time of the crime. He was convicted of covering up the murder and sentenced to 3 years in a juvenile facility, the maximum for his age, but always maintained he hadn't been in the apartment that night. that he didn't know anything. But in 2022, 13 years after the crime, a court convicted El Cuco and his mother of perjury. It was proven that both of them had lied during the 2011 trial, that they had coordinated their statements to protect each other, that they had looked Marta's family in the eyes and lied. El Cuco finally admitted he had been in the apartment that night, 13 years later. In December 2023, a new forensic report was submitted to the court. A tech company called Lazarus Technology had conducted an in-depth analysis of Miguel Carcaño's phones. And according to Marta's father, who announced it publicly on X, formerly Twitter, the report contained location data and messages that had never surfaced before in the investigation. New leads, new coordinates, maybe new lies waiting to be uncovered. 16 years later, the case was still active. As of today, Marta del Castillo's body has never been found. Miguel Carcaño served his 21-year sentence. He was also convicted in 2024 for another offense committed while in prison, which extended his time behind bars. But at no point, in any of his 7 versions, in any statement before any judge, did he say where his victim's body is. Marta's parents bought the apartment on Leon Octavo Street, the apartment where she died, with a purpose that's hard to even process. They were going to offer it to Carcaño if he helped them find their daughter, a desperate offer from 2 parents who just wanted to be able to bury their child. He never took it. The Marta del Castillo case isn't just the story of a killer who lied. It's the story of a system that failed, one that took 17 hours to search for a missing minor, that handed accomplices 0 prison time, that couldn't extract the truth from digital messages fast enough. It's the story of a family that has spent more than 15 years searching through rivers, landfills, ditches, and databases for a body that someone hid so well that even technology hasn't been able to find it. And it's the case that proves something that in 2009 felt new, but today we know all too well. Phones keep secrets. Messages leave trails. And sometimes the truth is sitting on a screen, in 4 cryptic words, in a ground zero that nobody got to decode in time. That was Spain. 3 cases. 3 ways the digital world collided with the worst of what people are capable of. A killer who built a mask on TikTok to get close to his victim. 5 men who filmed a crime and celebrated it on WhatsApp. And a killer who left messages on his girlfriend's phone that, even today, don't have a clear answer. If this is your first time on the channel, welcome. And I'm sorry because this wasn't exactly an easy episode to start with. If you've been here before, you already know how this works. Subscribe if you haven't already and let me know in the comments. What country do you want me to cover next? Until next time.